Hello, I'm Ekta Jaju. I represent Switch On Organic. It's a hybrid organization, and Organic Food is a social enterprise which I currently head, which looks at connecting smallholder organic farmers with export markets. And together we create organic value chains that starts at a small farmer on one end and export markets on the other, and everything in between, starting from training the farmers to providing them with organic inputs, to monitoring certification, aggregating of their produce, storage, processing, quality assurances, and then finally connecting it to the markets. So primarily when we start to work or decide to work with a farmer collective or a farmer group or an FPC, we have a very strong due diligence process. So I think at the first level, of course, there are two types of groups that we can start working with. Either a group which is not organic, who we will train, take them through this transition and convert, or a group which is already organic. Starting from a group which is not organic, ideally the first and foremost thing is it's very important that they are extremely passionate about organic farming, so they're not going into organic simply for the sake of making more money, because I think organic requires way more resilience, way more commitment, way more passion. There will be good days, there will be bad days. There's a lot of hard work that is involved, and someone who does not understand the challenges of chemicals, and someone who is not convinced that the way forward for them, for their community, is organic, is very difficult to sustain them into organic. They may end up doing some malpractices or other things. So A, that passion or that conviction is very important. B, they have to be organized as a collective. It can be an FPC, it can be a grower group, but they have to be organized. There has to be a minimum number of farmers who are growing similar kind of products, which already has a market traction or demand, or they are willing to change their agriculture practice to grow crops that would have demand in the organic market. I think these are a few things which are extremely important before we can decide to start working with a group. There are multiple level of challenges. So starting with our work with organic or with switch on, in fact, so when we trained the farmers, and once they were convinced that it works for them, a very big challenge starting with the markets. Through the foundation, the consumer connects or the melas did not help create a sustainable market for them. So for us, the goal is it has to be a sustainable, scalable market that can impact farmers. So these three criteria have to be met when we're looking at how to go about setting up value chains. And so which is when organic was set up to find markets. We started with a retail model. But that had loads of challenges. A small group of farmers in a certain area can't fill a consumer basket. So we ended up trading a lot of produce, which meant that we were selling less of what our farmers were growing and more of what we were trading. That was a really big challenge. The other challenge, of course, in initial days, we did not know how to handle organic produce. So we had a lot of problems with pests and spoilage. And then we had to learn our way through that. And so very quickly we realized, and then of course we also tried e-commerce, and we felt that our revenue budgets and advertising budgets were almost the same, and there wasn't enough consumer loyalty to hope that in long run we would be able to achieve more sustainability or profit. And we sort of then realized that bulk markets would make a lot of sense that could uptake a few varieties of produce in large volumes, which meant we could look at converting more and more farmers to organic and bringing them through this value chain. In the bulk space, of course, there are again bunch of challenges. In terms of certification, there's PGS and organic, but what we've realized is that when you're talking to market players, especially brands, etc., there is a more attraction for someone who's certified for NPOP vis-a-vis someone who's certified for PGS. And also, we were exposed to international organic markets, and we realized that the export sector had a very large potential for uptaking organic produce and providing premium prices, which meant that we could go back and also pay our farmers well. And so that space sort of made sense. But getting the certification is a really big challenge. It is a very document-heavy process, and India does not have one large farmer who we are trying to get certified, right? When we started working, we were looking at a grower group of 500 smallholder farmers. And to maintain the kind of, and we were looking at, of course, NPOP, but also NOP at some stage, and the kind of requirements that there are, this sort of was always, I think, made for one large farmer, and to translate that and do that kind of documentation for 500 smallholder farmers was a really big challenge. So I think getting the certification for our grower groups uh, was extremely challenging. That was a really big challenge. Then once we were able to cross that, we realized that the quality requirements for an export market were again way more stringent, and so making sure that we got all those relevant food safety certifications that were internationally recognized. And I think after that, of course, there were challenges with COVID, and there were challenges with the war, and so we realized that the markets in Europe significantly dipped. There were markets in US. Of course, there was a big challenge because US revoked its equivalency with India, and then there was a lot of certification issues with Europe. And so I think the challenge in the organic sector, some challenges were, of course, unique to what we were doing. Some challenges were sector challenges. But I think all in all, the challenges in the organic space continue to remain, and we continue to try and find solutions to see how we can overcome that. So, uh, honestly speaking, since we come from the environment, sustainability kind of a background, I would personally like to see a scenario where we were consuming local, we were consuming organic, we were consuming things from the region. But with all the work that we've done, we realized that the awareness in Kolkata or in eastern region for organic food was very low. Uh, Supply chain, so we currently work with supply chain of non-perishables, but we also really tried to see if we could bring in perishables into this, get our farmers to grow fruits and vegetables, supply that in Kolkata. And that whole supply chain was extremely challenging, especially because you're looking to move very small amount of produce through that supply chain, which makes it extremely expensive. And also it meant that our team was functioning 24/7, was very challenging. And and on the consumer front, there wasn't so much traction. So ideally, a local market that could be created where farmers could directly supply to consumers would be ideal. But in a more practical scenario, we've seen that there is a steady demand from export markets, and if you're able to identify the right value chains, that means that you're able to offer premium prices across the value chain, and have a more predictable market and supply chain in the current scenario. But I'm hopeful that things will change for a more sustainable future. Right. So currently, the kind of researches that we are currently engaging in is just trying to compare organic with conventional and try and understand what are the benefits that farmers are able to derive. Is there a benefit to the environment? Is there a benefit to the soil? Is there a benefit in terms of the carbon savings? And try and see if we can build a narrative around why organic makes more sense for farmers to switch to. I think that is a narrative that we are trying to build. Apart from that, we're also trying to see if there are some unsustainable practices which can be converted to more sustainable practice and then can be connected to some sort of economic model so that it makes sense for farmers to make that switch. So in that sense, we're looking in West Bengal and East India where we work, rabi paddy is a very big crop, and that leads to a lot of non-carbon emissions. And so we're trying to experiment with alternate wetting and drying and to see how that can have an impact on emissions, as well as if we can bring in some positive impact in terms of carbon credits to the farmers and see if we can sort of facilitate that transition in their growing practice. So these are a few areas in which we are currently doing research in, but of course the space is vast. I think the kind of models that need to be built in this space, how can we create more local production and consumption kind of ecosystems, what kind of drivers are required, what kind of policies are required, what kind of incentives are required. I think some of those things could be very interesting going forward.